Hey everyone, it's Sassy with New England Science and Sailing, and today we're checking out physics of sailing. We're going to be looking at 3 different things today. 1, what is sailing? 2, how did modern sailing become what it is today? And 3, how sailboats actually work to harness the power of the wind. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is what is sailing. Sailing consists of 3 things. 1, using the wind. 2, having the wind act on a sail or a kite. And 3, propelling that vehicle or vessel or kite forward. So now that we know what sailing actually is, we're going to look at a brief history of sailing. Sailing really helped to create civilizations as people sailed across bodies of water in order to settle and to trade. Now, the earliest depiction of sailing was found on a vase from ancient Egypt about 3,500 BC. Now, that's over 5,000 years ago. So we know that ancient people, ancient civilizations were using sailing at least 5,000 years ago. As sailing technologies advanced around the 1400s, people were able to make longer journeys and more strenuous journeys, allowing more civilizations to be created and to be advanced across the globe. With the invention of motors and engines, the use of sailing for exploration really started to go downwards. So modern day sailing is really only used for recreation and for competitive sports. So now that we know a brief history about sailing, and I mean really brief, we're going to look at the differences between historic sailing vessels and the more modern vessels you might see out on the water today. So first we want to look at hull. So the hull is basically the body of the boat. We have hulls on every single boat. So the hull for the historic vessel, it's pretty chunky, it's pretty large, it's slow. If you've ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean, you can see how big those ships are. They're not fast. Modern day sailboats have a nice, sleek design. They have, they're hydrodynamic, they're lightweight, they're made of like fiberglass, plastics, lighter materials than bulky wood. So they're gonna cruise through the water. Another thing that's super important is to look at the sails. So we talked about sailing, you need a sail, right? Historically, these sails on the boats were square. They caught a lot of wind, but they weren't super efficient. On the modern boats, you're gonna see a more triangular shaped sail, and we're gonna get into why that is in just a minute. So again, looking at the hull type, big and bulky, sleek, slim, fast, and the sail type, rectangular versus triangular. When we look at the sail rigging, square sails versus triangular sails, it's important to note that these are the most effective for how those boats were sailing. So, if we have wind coming from the north, our historic boats are going to be catching an immense amount of wind with their rectangular sails. But this only allows them to move with the wind, or we call that downwind. So the boats historically go with the wind. What's cool about these triangular sails is that they allow new modern boats to actually go into the wind, this way or this way. They can also go downwind, so they're very versatile in the direction that they can sail. Now the question I really want to ask you is, the modern boats, what direction sailing might be the fastest? Let's look at the actual physics behind a sail. So the sail is actually acting similarly to an airplane wing. We're going to have a high pressure on the inside of the sail. So I've drawn a sailboat here. If we are looking at it from a bird's eye view, this is what our sail is going to be looking like. Our wind is coming from this direction and it's blowing onto the sail. So this inside space, we call that the windward space because it's closest to the wind. This outside space is going to be our leeward side. It's away from the wind, and there's going to be a pressure difference. So inside is the most pressure. There's going to be high pressure there because that's where the wind is blowing directly on. And out here is the low pressure. So we're going to be looking at high and low pressure on this sail and how it's going to move our sailboat forward towards the wind. Okay, so let's look at this pressure difference again. We have our wind and it's coming from this direction. It's going to be going over the sail at different speeds. So inside the sail, we said that was high pressure because that's directly where the wind is blowing. And when the wind goes around the outside of the sail, it's going to go all the way around. It has farther to travel, and that's our low pressure, right? So the wind is actually moving faster around the outside of the sail than it is around the inside of the sail because it has to go farther. So farther the wind has to go, the faster it's going to go around the outside. There's low pressure out here, and this is going to generate a force called lift. Much like in an airplane, you have the wings, and if they're pointed up, you're going to go lifting up, and if they're pointing down, you're going to go down. And that is what happens with a sailboat, lift. Now, if we have wind and it's pushing on our sail, say my boat's in the water, it's pushing on my sail, why does my boat not tip over? What is holding my boat upright or maybe at a little bit of an angle, and what's allowing it to stay in the water instead of pushing it right over? So we have two items that are in the water that are actually counteracting this pushing, lifting motion. We have our centerboard or our keel here. We have our keel, and we also have a rudder. These two parts of the sailboat are acting against our lifting force and are pushing our sailboat back into the water. So if we have wind pushing against our sail, pushing it over, there's going to be a high and low pressure also acting on our keel. There's going to be a high pressure coming from down here because our boat wants to tip over, and a low pressure is going to be on the other side. So we have high pressure here, high pressure here. We're going to even out, and your boat might tip a little bit, but it's not going to tip over.